Hey, good afternoon everybody. Today I'm going to show you how to make peanut butter chocolate bars. These come out just amazing and they are definitely worth the work, okay? So you will need a candy thermometer for these, and the syrup is going to be cooked all the way to hard crack at the top, so it's quite important that you not walk away from this and pay attention to it at all times. You will also need a jar of all natural peanut butter. This one's 750 grams. If you can't get this stuff, you can buy some from a health food store. Just make sure you get the kinds that's just pure peanuts and where the oil separates. You cannot substitute different types of peanut butter. It just won't work. And trust me, I experimented a lot to get this just right, and you just got to make it the way I'm going to show you, but you'll be really glad that you did. Get your pan with the peanut butter ready before you start cooking the syrup, because you want this just ready to go when it's cooked. So what I do is I get myself a little Ziploc bag here, pour the oil out. I don't really find much use for this. If you want to keep it and use it for something else, that's up to you. So what you do is just carefully pour the oil off into the bag like that. And any few drops that went into the pan, I'm just going to mop up with a paper towel. Now, if you lose a little bit of peanut butter in the jar at the beginning, that's okay as long as it's not too much. So clean your pan up if you need to. Then get a good sturdy spatula and pour out all the peanut butter into a non-stick pan. This one is 9 by 13. Now, the natural stuff really gums up at the bottom, and it's important that you get right down there and dig it all out. So once you've dug out as much as you're going to get reasonably out of the jar, just set it aside. And you can see all the dried pieces from the bottom there. And just work it around with the spatula to make sure it gets even, and also that you've covered the bottom and a bit of the sides of the pan. You'll see the importance of this when the syrup goes in. In a small or medium-sized pan, combine stir the mixture over medium heat until the sugar dissolves. When it starts to boil, keep stirring until the syrup goes clear. You don't have to worry about crystals on the side of this. What you do have to be concerned with is making sure that your flame is not so high that it hits the edges of the pan, because this will actually start to caramelize on its own at the end. You'll actually see the color change, and you don't want to start it by burning the sides any earlier than you have to. The thermometer, unfortunately, will not clip onto this pan, and I'll try not to get the light and the lens here. Now, I do recommend that you keep a pot holder or a glove handy nearby, because you will need to tilt the pan. Let me just put that down so you can see it. You will need to tilt the pan to make sure that the bulb is in the syrup to get an accurate reading. And as usual with candy, make sure that you read it at eye level. Syrup's been cooking for about 10 minutes, and it's already halfway between softball and hardball. As the amount of water in the syrup evaporates, it will cook faster and faster, which is another reason why you should keep a really good eye on it. Now, my candy thermometer is designed that the bulb never touches the bottom. If you've got one of those free flying ones, be sure that when you dip it in that you're just in the liquid and that it does not touch the bottom of the pan, because else you're not going to get an accurate reading. It's 3 minutes later and it's gone to soft crack already. And I'll just zoom in here so you can see the consistency of the syrup, and also notice that it's starting to change color. It's been another 4 minutes, and I'll just give you a zoom here so you can see how the color of the syrup is changing. And just to put this into perspective, hard crack is 300 degrees Fahrenheit, which is approximately 1.5 times as hot as boiling water. Okay, so that should give you some idea of the respect this deserves when handling it. The thermometer just hit 300 degrees Fahrenheit, so I'm going to take it out and I'll just give you a quick zoom on the pan so you can get some idea of the consistency and the color at hard crack. And you'll notice on the edges it did brown a bit, but it didn't burn too badly. So now we'll move over to the pan. Holding the spatula, pour the syrup quickly and evenly over the surface of the peanut butter, trying to avoid the sides. You can scrape out quickly what you want from the bottom of the pan, but don't spend too much time on this. The syrup cools and hardens really fast. So getting a good grip on the side of the pan, start to stir with your spatula, picking it up from the bottom. And trying to make sure that you don't have any chunks of syrup in the corners. Because when this starts to cool off, it does it really quickly and you will not be able to dig them out and mix them back in. If you've cooked your syrup properly, this is what you should see when it starts to cool off. As you beat it, it will start to form threads. And I'll just give you a little zoom here. Hope I don't get in the way. The mash should start to lighten as well as you stir it. Okay, I'll go back out. So it's important now that you just keep stirring and push it apart as you do. Chase around any greasy bits, turn it over if you have to. What you're trying to achieve is that nice pale color there with the threads that are pulling. See that? Now, this is one of those pieces I was talking about. This will not work in. I'm just going to take it out now. The syrup is cooling off really fast. That was a bit warm, but I didn't get burned. So once the syrup is cooled enough that you can touch it, just dig around with a spatula and pick out any hard chunks that didn't get stirred in. Okay, it's cool enough to touch, and once it is, and I will zoom again for you here. Okay, once it is, you want to pick it up and start pulling on it. The reason you're doing this is to create the consistency of the finished product, and also to make sure that you've worked through all the syrup into the peanut butter. Okay, once you're satisfied that all of that's been worked through nicely and you've got threads, sort of looks a bit like cotton candy, and then it's nice and even, get yourself a cutting board and a rolling pin and gather up all the candy and put it out on the board. Knead it up by hand a little bit, then start to push it out. This will firm up pretty quick, so you do have to gauge how much heat your hands can stand, because if you let it cool off too long, it'll harden up enough that you'll have a really hard time doing this. So once you've flattened it out about as good as you can, get your rolling pin. Now these little bits that you see lifting off here are actually flakes or layers in the candy. And one thing I should point out is that this candy is going to be the toughest right when you make it. It will soften overnight to a texture that you may recognize from a commercially available product. But the reason you want to make the bars right away is after it cools down and toughens up is the easiest time it is to handle it for dipping. So once you've got that evened out, just beat it. The reason you're beating it is to get sugar crystals to form in the middle of the peanut butter. So once you beat it on one side, carefully pick it up, turn it over, reform it a little if you have to, if it starts to crack. Roll it out a bit. You actually can hear some of the sugar crystals breaking, which is a very good sign. These aren't going to be perfect like store-bought, but they sure taste good. Now, if you notice any spots of grease on it, just get a couple of paper towels and just absorb the grease with that. You can turn it over and do the same thing on the other side. Get yourself a sharp knife. I like to use my cleaver. And just cut it up. Now, I don't make long chocolate bars with this because they tend to break when you're dipping them. So smaller is better. I'm going to cut this into strips of about thirds. And of course, you can do anything you want with your own candy. Okay. Then after that, just start cutting it across to form the individual bars. I think you can actually hear that. That's nearly solidified right now. And if you don't want to dip these in chocolate, you can eat these just like that. But they are so much better in chocolate, I must say. There you go. So let's do a quick head count here. This is going to make 45 little chocolate bars. So even at the price of the peanut butter, And the chocolate chips, yeah, this is just a little bit cheaper than store, and yes, it tastes so much better. Now you should let these cool off completely before you start dipping them, but this one looks busted, so I'll pick it up and I'll just give you a look here and do a taste test. Yeah, so there's the consistency on the inside. Like I said, all of these little strands will resorb into the peanut butter overnight, so even though they taste great now, they'll taste even better tomorrow. For the dipping, I just use the microwave. One reason being it's a lot quicker and easier, and the other one is if you're going to have to repeatedly heat this up, if you use the tempering method with hot water over the stove in a double boiler, the amount of moisture that's going to get in will cause the chocolate to get gritty and or just plain seize up. So take your chocolate chips, I just pour out a bit, you can keep adding as you go, and heat these up in the microwave at 10-15 second bursts, stirring in between until it liquefies. Once the chocolate is melted nicely, just get a fork and of course one of your chocolate bars. And just drop it into the chocolate, and you can either kind of drench it with the fork or pick it up and roll it. See what I mean about them not being too big? If you had them much longer than that, they just snap. Now I've got a setup here where I've got a cookie sheet with a piece of parchment underneath, so you can recycle the chocolate that falls to the bottom so you don't run out of chocolate chips. So after that's dripped, just lay that out onto the sheet and repeat the process. Alright, so when you notice the bottom of your bowl that it's getting a bit tough to coat them, what you do is just add some more chocolate chips to the bowl you've been using, heat them up until they melt, and just keep going. For these ones that are done here, make sure you let them cool at room temperature until the coating is completely dry. And as I said earlier in the video, these are best if you let them sit overnight for the best texture. If you can't wait, sure, just dig in. And I do hope you enjoyed watching this, and I really hope you try this to find out that they do taste just as good as they look. Well, thanks for watching, and I do hope to see you again.